Okay, so just to continue in the psicha, in this ethical introduction to the laws of stealing, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had taught that a ganav is worse than a gazlan because at least the gazlan shows that he makes no distinction between human beings and God, but a ganav is worse because he doesn't care about God seeing him. He only cares about human beings seeing him. So in a sense, he's doing something more offensive because he's uh, he's making human beings' perception more important than Hashem. Ve'almasha Omer Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Abal zeh haganav osa ayin shalmatahu ki'ilu eino roa, va'ozen shalmata ki'ilu eino shoma'as v'chulei. Matzinu al zeh ba'avos perak aleph shemasi Rabbeinu HaKodosh. We see that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi warns us about this. Sha'amar sham histakel b'shlosha dvarim ve'ina tabal lidei avera. So first of all, there's a mistake. It's in the second parak of Pirkei Avos, not the first. But he says, take a look at three things and you won't come to sin. Da malamayla mimcha ayin roeh va'ozen shoma'as v'chol ma'asecha ba'sefer nichtovim. Know what is above you. A seeing eye, a listening ear, and all of your deeds are written in a book. Pirish Rashi, Shechina roa v'shoma'as v'koseves b'sefer. And as Rashi explains, God's divine presence is constantly seeing, listening, and recording. Uvemeiri pirish dama v'chulei klomer shetamin b'mitziyu so yisborach. That the Meiri writes this is an essential belief in God, is what is being advocated. Uverabenu b'chaya pirish dama lamayla hi hashchina shehi lamayla mirosha shel adam. That Rabbeinu Bechaya explains, know what is above you. This refers to the Shechina that is above your head. Kid Amar Rav Yosef of a Paris Suja Areshe. Rav Yosef would wear some kind of covering over his head at all times. Amar Shechina L'mayla Miroshi. The Shechina is above my head. That's where we get the principle of wearing a kippah, right? Rabbeinu Yaakov Reb Shimshon Piresh HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shehut Sofe Bach Kitsofe Ha'omed B'makom Gavo Al Mishmarto Eno Roe Ma'asecha Ve'ozno Shamas Devarecha Ve'efshar Lihisater Mimen. That essentially the same idea, that God is always watching and there's no way to hide yourself from him. K'moshe Nemar Im Yisater Ish B'mistarim Va'ani Lo Er'enu. As the prophet Yirmiyah says, is you think it's possible for a person to hide and might not seeing him? Uverabenu Yona Piresha HaKadosh Baruch Hu Roa V'Yodea Kol Maaseh B'nei Adam V'Zocher Es HaKol Ki'ilu V'Nichtav Lefanav. Rabbeinu Yona adds that not only is God watching and listening and aware of everything that we're doing, but he remembers everything as if it's recorded. In other words, it's not that God is literally writing down everything, but God's memory is permanent and eternal. Shaharei hakol golui lefanav ve'ein shechacha lefanav yisbarach v'yishalem ra'ah tachas ma'asav harayim. And therefore, God will compensate evil for evil. Uvisfarnu peirei she'ein onesh ha'avera bala'alter v'lo yitan ha'ichor ki amnam kol ma'asecha b'sefer nichtavim ligmol schar v'lanosh alehem. And the Sfarnu explains that therefore, if you don't find a person being punished right away, it's not because God didn't see it. It's to the contrary, that God has recorded it permanently, and you can be assured that there will be repercussions.
You don't get away with anything.
You don't get away with anything. V'yesh lahatim divrei Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai she'amar zeh haganov lo hishva kavod eved l'kvod kono v'chulei al ma she'amru b'gemara b'brachos. We can sort of enhance the words of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who says that a ganaf is worse than a gazlan because he doesn't equate God's honor with the human honor, based on what the Gemara in Brachos says. Kishachala Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the same Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, when he became ill, v'nichnasu talmidav levakro, amru lo talmidav barchenu. So when his students came to visit him, they said to him, our teacher, our Rebbe, please bless us, before you leave this world. Amar lahem yihi ratzon sheyehei mora shamayim aleichem kemora basar v'dam. So he said, may the fear of heaven be upon you as intensely as your fear of man. May you fear God as much as you fear man. Mm-hmm. So Amrlo Talmidav Adkan. So his student said, that's it. In other words, shouldn't we fear God more than man? So Amr Lahem Ulavai. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, Halavai, that your fear of God will at least be as great as your fear of man. Teidu kisha adam over avera omer shalo yirani adam ayin sham. The proof is that when people sin, they want to do it in secrecy so that no one sees them. Mm-hmm. But they're prepared to do the sin even though God is right there. V'zehu sha'amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai sham zeki beid ha'eved yoser mekono sheyarei mibnei adam avalo me'HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So all he's pointing out is that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is consistent. He basically told his students that which he had remarked upon previously, that a ganav is inferior to a gazlan. Uvemechilta mishpatim shemanu chachamim shiva ganovim heim. The interesting mechilta states that there are 7 types of ganavim. Harishon shebekulam gonev da'as habrios. The first type of ganav is a person who deceives others. And that's called stealing, because what you're doing is you're stealing their minds. You're stealing knowledge from them. That's a form of deceit, is a form of stealing. Hasheni gonev b'midos uv'mishkalos. The second person is one who steals by having faulty weights and measures. So he's, again, deceiving his customers. Hashlishi gonev isurei hana'a shapatr mitashlumin. A third type of ganav is a person who steals but doesn't have to pay for what he stole because he's stealing something that the owner is not permitted to benefit from. So if I steal, let's say, something that has to do with idolatry, or if I steal someone's orla, or meaning the produce that grows during the first 3 years, or if I steal somebody's mixture of cooked milk and meat, person is not allowed to benefit from these things, so they have no value. And yet, by stealing them, I've still done an act of theft. The fourth person is a person who steals contracts, real estate, or things that were dedicated to the temple. In these cases, you only have to pay back what you stole. There's no penalty beyond that. The fifth kind is a person who steals chattel, who has to pay double of what he stole. That's tashlume kefil, when you steal. And ashishi gonev shor v'seh u'mishalim arba v'chamisha. The sixth type of ganav is a person who steals livestock, in which case he'll have to pay 4 or 5 times the amount. If he steals an ox, he pays 5 times the amount. If he steals a sheep, he pays 4 times the amount. And you know the reason why. There's a difference. The Rashi tells us that when you steal a sheep, God goes easy on you and says, okay, I'll only make you pay 4 times and not 5 times, because when you steal a sheep, you have to schlep. You have to pick up the sheep and schlep it. So the burden that you incurred by schlepping the sheep around is gets you a discount on how much you have to pay. That's what Rashi says.
And an ox is 5? This is harder to.
An ox you can't pick up. You have to just lead it.
Just lead it, so there's less.
Yeah, right. And hashvi gonev nefesh shechayiv misa. And the 7th type of ganef is a person who does an act of kidnapping, for which the penalty is death. These people who kidnapped our hostages, they are liable. They're all liable for the death penalty.
Rabbi,
there should be
in the order that is presented here.
Yeah,
I always thought that like weights and measures was. Well, I would think that should be number 1. Shouldn't it, in terms of what the punishment is for that?
Yeah, so you're right. I believe what the Mechilta is doing is that it's listing these in order of penalty, least amount of penalty to the heaviest penalty. So the least penalty is where you don't have to pay anything because you've committed an act of deceit. Let's say I just tell you, oh, my son just graduated from Harvard, and it's not true, but I just want to show off. So you can't say that there's any substantive loss of money. So as a result, I pay nothing for that deceit, right? But that's a deception, that's a form of stealing. The second form of stealing could involve some loss of money, where I, let's say, charge you for 10 pounds when I only sold you 9.5 pounds. So there I have to pay you back for the missing amount that I deceived you, but it's a minimal payment. The third is something where I'm not going to have to pay at all. And then it goes progressively worse. The fourth is where I have to pay the principal. Fifth is where I have to pay double. Six is where I have to pay 4 and 5. And then the seventh is where I have to forfeit my life. So
It's only that second and third that seems like it might be on the border.
second and third, yeah, unless you argue that when it comes to faulty weights and measures, sometimes you don't know how to pay back because there's no way, so many customers, and you don't know how to make compensation. Okay.
But isn't that one of the questions that's going to be asked of us when we leave this world?
Because
Honest in business.
Honest in business, sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's why we're learning all this.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, va'amru b'gemara kol hagosel es chaveru shava pruta ki ilu notel nishmaso mimenu. The Gemara further says that anyone who steals from his friend, even a pittance, a shava pruta, is as if you're taking his soul from him. Shenamar, as it says in Mishlei, Kain orchos kol botzeya betza es nefesh ba'olav yikach. The way of a person who has ill-gotten gains is taking the soul of the person from whom he's taken those things. V'lo nafsho bilvad ela nafesh banavu v'nosav. And the Gemara goes on further. Not only it's like you're killing the person, your victim, but it's like you're killing his children also. Shenemar v'achal kitzircha v'lachmacha yochlu banecha uv'nosecha. Those who eat your harvest are like eating your children because they're depriving your children of their meals. V'cholagonev mamon mishavar pruta u'maila over al isra lo saser shenemar lo tignovo. And you're further violating a mitzvah lo sase. Let me just see. Okay, so he continues along in that path in the, let's see. Hold on. Hold on a second. Yeah, that's okay. You get the gist of what he's doing. Okay. So now we go on and do his general introduction to Hilchot Gezela. Okay. Hilchot Gezela. Amru Rabotenu Chamor Chet HaGeneva Min HaGezel She'eno Mashve Eved Lakono Va'osa Ayin Shomayla Kilu Eino Roeh. So we just saw that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had said that a thief is worse than a robber because you're making it as if God can't see, because you're only afraid of humans, you're not afraid of God. And it's very important that adults admonish their children very strongly about the prohibition of theft. Ki harbe yaldut oseh v'chaveirim hara'im osim. He says, because youth can have a way of corrupting people, And it all depends on their chevra. It depends on who they hang out with.
Yes.
And if you don't nip it in the bud, children can go from bad to worse, and they can become gluttonous and wayward. And therefore you have to open their eyes at a very early age to this crime. The tov legever shelo yitzamsem kol kach im yoladav v'yatir lahem ma'at pas yado litain lahem eze prutot kipam b'fa'am kidei shelo yihiyu te'evim v'ra'av tanim al kol davar. And it is considered to be praiseworthy for a person to open up his palm, open up his hand once in a while, and share some of his money with his children. Why? Because if you are, the word is niggardly, if you are miserly with your,
And there's nothing wrong with that word.
with your children, if you're miserly with your children, then your children will be constantly hungry to obtain money, and you're actually doing them a disservice by never giving them any kind of allowance or anything like that, because they're always going to be hungry to get money. The yavo'u levakesh lignov, and they're going to want to steal. The gamlo yargil otam b'ma'acholim tovim u'malbushim yakarim b'ta'anugot b'nei adam, and furthermore, be conservative in the luxuries that you heap upon your children, whether it's good food or cars, resorts, things like that, clothing, and the like. Kid wants a Rolex or wants a special bag or a special accessory. Be conservative in what you give your children. In other words, on the one hand, don't be completely miserly, but on the other hand, don't shower them with lavish gifts either. Because then by getting your child in the habit of having luxuries in life, when he discovers, hey, the pipeline has been sealed from my parents, he's going to want to try. He may be tempted to cut corners in gaining those things that he's used to. In other words, if you feed his habit, then once you cut him off financially because he's an adult, he's going to feel that he has to cheat in order to get the things that he's used to. L'chvar sipru ma'aseh b'talmid chacham echad shelimdo aviv b'gedolot lefi oshro v'achar mitat aviv avad ha'osher. So there's a story about a Talmud Chacham who had a son, and the father would lavish his sons with a very expensive lifestyle. When the father passed away, the wealth, the estate dried up. Ubikesh limudo ad sheba lignov svarim mi beis hamedrash, and the son was so desperate to continue in that lifestyle that he began stealing svarim from the beis medrash to sell them off. Uchesheniskala hadavar heimir data rachmana litzlan, and when it was discovered and he was exposed, the son left Yiddishkeit. Lachein kol arum yase bedas v'yechalkel dvarav b'mishpat lo yitzamtzem kol kach v'lo yifazer kol kach. And therefore, every person has to use his discretion in the way that he raises his children. He should not be too miserly, but he shouldn't be too effusive in giving gifts.
Are we talking up to bar mitzvah age, basically? Or is that continue on later on?
I think until they become adults. I think until they become adults, I think the teenage years are very precarious also. Kids when they become teenagers become very start to become aware of these kinds of luxuries in life. So you have to be careful. Right? In accordance with the financial blessings that a God has given someone, a person should always be moderate in the way that he treats his children. Ula'olam yazhir et banav al ha'isurim v'yodiyim chomer shebahem. A person should always, talk to his children about the prohibitions of theft and of cheating other people, and express to them how serious this is. And also be very vigilant about who his children are hanging out with. Make sure that his children do not hang out with the bad crowd, so that they can always follow the right path. Okay, so that's point number one. Next, v'yesh min geneva acheret shadashu barabim alohu genevas da'as habrios. There's a certain kind of stealing that is a very common occurrence, that people tend to deceive others. V'yesh minim miminim shalom, and there are different kinds of deception. And as we pointed out, deception is a form of stealing. You're stealing people's impression. Haklal hu shekol shemishtadel leida masha belev chavero berov devarim hadvarim genevas das mikri va'aser. He says the general rule is, if you say things that are not true in order to try and discover what your friend is thinking, in other words, you start talking to him in ways in order to extract information from him, that's a form of deception also. Unless you're doing it for a mitzvah purpose, to help someone who's suffering or to prevent someone from committing a forbidden act. So anytime you, let's say, you start schmoozing up a person in order to extract information, that's a form of deception. And if you try to display friendship to a person when you don't feel that friendship, that's a form of ginevas das, because maybe you're doing it for self-serving purposes. And he who walks innocently with God will be secure. So up until now, he's quoted a sefer called the Pele Yoetz. Okay. So with that general introduction, let's go on. Hilchot Gezela Piskei Dinim. So let's look at some halacha. Gezela Isura Afilu B'chol Shehu Unikol Adam. For the first basic halacha is min haTorah asur lignov ligzol afilu kol shehu. The Torah forbids you to steal or rob even the smallest amount. Bein shagonev mi Yisrael gadol, ubein shagonev me katan, ubein shagonev me hagoy. It makes no difference whether you're stealing from an adult Jew, from a minor, or from a Gentile. O me hahekdesh, o me kupas tzedakah, or whether you steal from sanctified property or from tzedakah. Machmas shechatzi shir asr midin Torah. And the reason why all of these forms of stealing are prohibited, even the smallest amount, is because the Torah prohibits stealing even a portion of what is forbidden. That's what we say chatzi shir. When the Torah says you can't eat a kazayas of something, even eating less than a kazayas is an infraction of the Torah. It's just that you're not punishable, right? But it's still prohibited. Ulam alav shelo tigzol eno over aladavka b'shava pruta. You're only in violation of lo tigzol if the amount that you steal is a shava pruta. Kimochein asur lignov afilu derech schok o kedei litzaro. We saw this in Rav Shiraga's sefer. Similarly, you're not allowed to steal from someone even if you're doing it as a joke, or you're doing it in order to annoy them. Gam ka'asher kavanaso la'achzer pishnayim. Or let's say your intent is I'll steal from them and I'll pay them back double. I know that they're down and out and they need money and they're too proud to accept a handout. So here's a way that I can get them money. I'll steal something from them that they have in their house. And when I get caught, so to speak, I'll say, oh, you caught me. here it is, and I owe you, I have to pay you more. So kedei lahanoso al yedei iser b'tashlumei kefil, and the reason, and that's also usher. V'hatam kedei shelo yargil ha'adam atzmo b'kach. The reason being is that even though your intentions are noble, but by getting into the habit of stealing, you're doing something harmful to yourself. And as I guess it has a caustic effect overall on society. Let's see if there's any notes that we should be seeing. No, usually the notes are footnotes for sources. Okay, next. Tam heter netilas davar muat lelo rishos. There is, however, a heter to sometimes take something from someone if it's a small amount that you know that he doesn't mind. You can take that without asking permission. So he says, "Hatam shebidvarim she'eno demakbid aleim ein bohem mishum gezel, umutar lo lishtamish bechayfetz af mibli yediat haba'alim." That there is this exception made that you're allowed to take something that you know that your friend doesn't mind if you take it. Let's say you see a friend's sefer, and you pick it up and you want to just read from it, or you see your friend's pen and you can borrow it because you know he won't mind. He says that seems to be a well-accepted principle where you don't even have to ask permission. Yesh misham evor b'tam hadavar da'anu omrim she'itiru sheheteru shel hachefetz u'b'toras hefker. Some say that it's because your friend considers this item hefker, that it belongs to anyone who wants it. It's as if he basically made it ownerless. Others explain it differently. That it's not that your friend is thinking that this doesn't belong to me, but he wants to share of whatever he has with others. He wants to be benevolent. But either way, if you know, if it's something that's so minor that you know that a person wouldn't mind if you borrowed it, you're allowed to borrow it for one of those two reasons, either because your friend is sort of making it hefker, or because he wants to gift the use of that item to other people. Next, gezela mikrovav, stealing from relatives. Yesh anoshim nichshalim b'isur geneva, umatirin la'atzman lignov mikrovehem, kegon ben me aviv o me imo, o me achoso o isha mi baila. Some people, unfortunately, violate this law because they take liberties with relatives, like a child who takes a parent's item, or a sibling who takes from his older sister, let's say, or a wife who takes one of her husband's assets when there hasn't been a clear and established sharing of assets. Sometimes, depending on the relationship, a woman who takes something from her husband could be doing something really that is geneva. Isser gomer yesh bedavar v'tzarich lahashiv lahem es hageneva o sheyimchalu beferish. This is still nonetheless a biblical violation, and you either have to return what you took, or you have to convince them to be moichel, to say, okay, I'm not gonna, I suppose that there are a number of instances where children assume, and they're not allowed to do that. Okay, next, Isser Gezel Hagoy, stealing from Gentiles. Kol Hagonev Shava Pruto Lamaila, over below Sasa Shnemer Lo Tignovu. You are in violation of you shall not steal if you steal anything that is a pruta or more. Echad Hagonev Mammon Yisrael, Ve'echad Hagonev Mammon Goy, over below Tasa. And it makes absolutely no difference whether the theft is from a Jew or a non-Jew. Okay, so that couldn't be clearer. Okay. And as a matter of fact, the footnote points out that according to the Rambam, even if he's an idolater, even if he's a heathen, right, where we know that there's an attitude towards the idolater that we're not there to help him, but we're still not permitted to steal from him. Okay. Hashavas gezelas. Oh, okay. We'll hold it here. We'll continue Mirz Hashem tomorrow. Okay, have a great day, everyone. We're just going through the basics